C'est moi qui t'ai appelé par erreur.
Tu valider avec elle? Oui, quand même, la vidéo en passant.
C'était comme Mike and Louche.
comme manqué en conversation. Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
On va aller voir, c'est sûrement. Ouais, sûr. Je déplace la musique. C'est la semaine de relâche. Les amis réalisateurs. Ça va être le restant des cigares au chou avec le chili congelé depuis 4 mois. C'est ça, puis elle va être fière avec ça. Tu veux faire une petite manche? C'est quoi l'autre chose?
Tortellino au fromage, cœur d'artichaut dans une sauce tomate.
Et c'est des motons de quoi?
Crème comme ça.
Fait que c'est bien cher. Une petite fourchette de style, puis ça pourrait être. L'estrade de sang, ça va pas mal. Ça fait. Le répéter, c'est quoi? Est-ce que ça va? Il sera pas les prix, c'est fait, peut-être ça va être clair. Là, je me sens visé.
Je faisais juste penser à ce qui s'est passé hier matin. Regarde donc.
C'est parce qu'on mangeait. Tu faisais combien de sachet avec le canari?
Oui, c'est vrai.
Fait que j'enlève mon oreillette quand je mangeais tout ça. Moi, je chante, je chante. C'est difficile avec les autres. Je suis question orthographe. Quel sac de transport pour les trépieds de Australis?
Inclus, ça va pas comme tout le temps. Ben oui. Inclus, ça.
Ah oui.
Ouais, c'est inclus.
Ah oui.
Qu'est-ce que tu mets au féminin?
Ça allait, pour faire chaque échange aujourd'hui, c'était un objectif d'espoir. Je l'ai pas tu dis,
Faut déconnecter l'ordi de la plateforme après tous les jours. Parce qu'Interaction fait son propre record. Fait que c'est Interaction qui fait ça. Le pavillon du Canada a fait mais ils n'ont pas été pendant 5 jours. Fait qu'il y a eu l'équivalent de 5 jours de record. C'est juste qu'elle a une condition. Ok, j'ai plus pas de
Good afternoon and welcome to let's resume the second day of the Nature and Culture Summit. For this afternoon, we will read the declaration as the outcome of this two-day meeting and very substantive discussion. After the reading of the declaration, we will have some comments, and then we will have a cultural performance from the Inuit people. And finally, and at 4:30 we have the reception. All right. So let me introduce the Declaration on the Nature and Cultures. This was when the organizers of the Nature and Culture, UNESCO, IUCN, the CBD Secretariat, along with the indigenous people and local committees, mainly organized in the International Indigenous Forum for Biodiversity, as well as indigenous representatives from Canada, the three indigenous peoples, Métis, Inuit, and First Nations, met on 3 online sessions prior to the summit. These meetings took place on the 3rd of November, 17 November, and 30 November. In these 3 meetings, they developed an extensive draft declaration, and over these 2 days, we review and update according to the substantive discussion taking place during the summit. I just also want to recall that on December 10, the COP15 plenary session adopted or renew its commitment to the new program of work on links between nature and culture, and this declaration aims to give support to the implementation of the joint program as a tool to implement from a perspective of the links between nature and culture, the implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. With that, I would like to give the floor to Herbert Ackney, Vice President of the International Affairs of the Inuit Circular Council in Canada, to read the statement, the declaration. You have the floor.
Kuya Naini Kapaka, I appreciate. I'm an honored today to be here to bring this declaration to the floor. Today, I'm, as mentioned, the Yunnan Tiotagi Natural Culture Summit Declaration towards flourishing diversity. I will do my best to read slow for interpretation. So the declaration reads, we, the participants in the Nature and Culture Summit held in Montreal, Canada, hereby respectfully acknowledge the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations as traditional custodians of this land, including the ancestors and indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked this territory, showing the pathways of peace. Acknowledging the contribution of the government of China and Canada to the hosting of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention. Acknowledging the government of the People's Republic of China and Yunnan Province, one of the most ethically diverse provinces of China, and the Chinese Environmental Journalism Association for their support in the summit. Celebrating the adoption on 10th December 2022 by COP15 of the CBD, of the Joint Program of Work and the links between biological and cultural diversity, the Joint Program. Welcoming the United Nations General Assembly, Resolution A/RES/74/135, proclaiming the period between 2022 and 2032 as the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, also known as IDIL 2022-2032, to draw global attention to the critical situation of many Indigenous languages and to mobilize stakeholders and resources for their preservation, revitalization, and promotion, urging for the adoption and adaptive implementation of a transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Let me carry on to the next page. It says also, we, the participants, therefore commit to work together in a holistic manner to, one, promote the recognition of the contributions and rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities, including free, prior, and informed consent, land and territorial rights, their knowledge, innovations, and practices in conservation, sustainable use, and fair and equitable benefit sharing arising from the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and its implementation and monitoring, including through the joint program, to ensure the flourishing of both cultural and biological diversity. Number 2, recognize the diverse values of nature, including those values held by peoples who are living from, living with, living in, and living as nature as part of the wider healing relationships with the environment, based on mutuality, accountability, and reciprocity, respecting the linkages between Mother Earth and biocultural resilience. Number 3, further recognize that nature and culture are linked through traditional knowledge, which is in turn expressed through language in stories, songs, or prayer. Number 4, support the inter and intragenerational transmission, regeneration, restoration, and revitalization of traditional knowledge and languages, recognizing the individual and the collective rights of peoples to the continuity of their languages without discrimination. Number 5, prioritize language revitalization and restoration with sufficient and focused funding, and promote long-term commitments to increase the number of fluent speakers and, in particular, connect youth in the land and culture through language, seeking innovative synergies with the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. In partnership with existing grassroots revitalization initiatives, funding should prioritize growing new speakers and fluency first and foremost, enhanced as relevant by technical language research and dictionary development. Number 6, promote local Indigenous communication networks and media for critical information dissemination, knowledge, management, as well as intergenerational connection and education. Number 7, reach out and invite strategic partners for working on cultural diversity and biodiversity, including international cultural conventions and culture sector partners, to contribute to the implementation of the joint program. Number 8, ensure the incorporation of biocultural dimensions in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, linking biological and cultural diversity through the implementation of the joint program. Number 9, ensure Indigenous peoples and local communities full and effective partnership in the joint program, including its implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, and facilitate inclusive and equitable participation of all actors, ensuring in particular the involvement of youth, women, diverse gender, diverse identities, and people with disabilities. Number 10, facilitate dialogue to ensure inclusive implementation of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework at national and subnational levels, including through the joint program, and promote national pilot projects through the lens of Indigenous language revitalization and restoration. Number 11, support the review and updating of the traditional knowledge indicators, particularly linguistic diversity, land use change, and land tenure, traditional occupations and participation, adopted decision 8-/28, and also support the full potential of community-based monitoring information systems, also known as CBMIS. And finally, number 12, mobilize adequate and innovative financial resources to promote direct self-administered funding for Indigenous peoples and local communities to ensure continuity of their biocultural diversity and support the implementation of the activities of the joint program. That is all I have for now, and Kuyanani for allowing me to share this, the declaration, Kabak. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Now I would like to open the floor for some comments. Yes, please, you could take the mic from the aisle.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into putting that together, and it sounds really great. Just a few comments for your consideration. I wonder if, and maybe you've done this, but in the preamble, it might be worth mentioning the evidence that's come from IPBES, recognizing the extensive evidence that it's produced, particularly on the diverse values of biodiversity and the gap in terms of recognizing indigenous values. I don't know quite how to frame it in language, but it's just an idea. And then on the third point, on the actions that we will do, the sort of declaration bit, you said nature and culture are linked through. I wonder if we could build on the Declaration of Belém of 1988 and put the word inextricably. Nature and culture are inextricably linked through traditional knowledge expressed through language, holistic, etc. That's just something that might strengthen it, if not deeply or something like that. And then when you said expressed through language, and I wonder if we could elaborate a bit and maybe include holistic concepts, creation stories, cultural values, what we heard about yesterday. And then I think there was something later on about establishing linkages or some sort of networking. I can't remember exactly the language, but one of the ideas that came out of the communications panel was establishing a sort of open global coalition that sort of links existing networks working on nature and culture. So maybe that could be included. Point 8, you mentioned integrating, I think, biocultural dimensions. I don't know if people will know what that means. I don't know if biocultural diversity might be clearer. Anyway, that was just a few suggestions in case that helps. But thank you very much for your hard work. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Yes, let me give the floor there.
Thank you so much. So Christophe Rivet, representing Ecomos. Indeed, I want to second the previous speaker's comments. I think they are important points to note, and I also congratulate the group on drafting something that is extremely complex. So congratulations on that. I also wish to point out that I'm really happy that there's a specific recommendation that pursues the relationship that we are now building between organizations. That's something extremely positive for us. I'm only going to make two small, but I think important recommendations. The first one is the idea of place. You may wish to introduce this idea in the way that you've crafted, because in fact, what we've heard from the different speakers is that deep relationship with the land, with fauna, with flora, with the water bodies of all sorts. So having a statement that connects to place, I think that would be a critical statement to make. And the second one is one that echoes a few comments that were made during the panel I participated in, which is the relationship with urban pressures. And whether you want to consider it as part of the consideration, or you could also entertain a recommendation that says, recognizing that there is a relationship between urban growth and the pressures of population density in urban environments, study the impacts or the implication on habitat preservation or on biodiversity. Whatever you see as appropriate, I think it would open the door to having the partnerships that we have on nature culture have perhaps a project to work on that's substantial, and also really alert the international community to that relationship between urban matters and the impact on biodiversity. Thank you.
I see you might have comments. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Peter Bridgewater. I have several different hats, so I won't bother to say which one I'm using at the moment. I think, as both previous speakers have said, this is a really useful document that I think will advance the whole nature, culture, language agenda within the global biodiversity framework. And I really do commend the group that's been working on this, obviously, for some time. But as always, when you have a document like this, there are always a few points that are useful. There's one very specific point that I'd like to make in the preambular paragraph, which welcomes the UN General Assembly resolution. You talk about for their preservation, revitalization, and promotion. Preservation, I think, is people understand what it means, but it also implies fossilization, I think. And I would suggest that you consider using something like continued use rather than preservation, because that's really what we're talking about, I think, maintaining active use. One other point perhaps to make would be in 8, which was mentioned by the previous speaker here. 8 was ensure the incorporation of biocultural dimensions in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, linking biological and cultural diversity through the implementation of the joint program. I think that could be rephrased, perhaps by talking about, by putting it in the way that ensure linking biological and cultural diversity as biocultural diversity in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Something like that. It just needs a little bit more, I think, polish to bring that out, as my colleague was mentioning earlier. And something that was missing that you might want to think about including, you may not want to think about including, but I'll suggest it. There's a lot of discussion on nature's contributions to people, which has kind of replaced ecosystem services, and it sort of has and it hasn't. But I think the important thing that is often lost in that discussion is that nature's contributions to people are reinforced by people's contributions to nature, which in turn are reinforced by nature's contributions to people. It's a feedback, a circular process. And because nature's contributions to people will appear in various other documents, and it's not in here, I think it will be good to have one more point that actually stresses that, whether it's a preambular point or whatever. Perhaps a preambular point is sufficient, but actually just explains that nature's contributions to people incorporate biocultural diversity, and that nature's contributions to people are only available through people's contributions to nature. Thank you.
Thank you. I will try to go to several comments. Yes, in terms of the recognition of the IPBES assessment on values of nature, this is recognized, and definitely we will include it. It's been an important instrument for the CBD. Thank you for the comment. In regards to Dr. Ribet, yes, I think the reference in regards to land, that was also reflected, and it was really well reflected by indigenous people and their spiritual relationship with land. And definitely that's something that also we could edit the text, that it could be better reflected. Part of the joint program, and part of the declaration, and a very important part of the summit is that we could create coalition for nature and culture. And the joint program is being led by 3 organizations, mainly UNESCO, IUCN, but of course this includes the participation of indigenous people and local communities, and we really want to see this program expanding in partnership. And definitely that comment on enhancing participation in the joint program, that's welcome. Yes, in regards to paragraph 8 and we could definitely work around editing the reference to links between biocultural dimension with the post-2020. But I think the main message as well in that paragraph is that the implementation of the post-2020 give us an opportunity to the joint program of work, who has the specific mandate to work on the links between nature and culture, to implement the post-2020 through this joint program of work. Because as you might see, the implementation of the post-2020 will be benefit from several programs, the Gender Action Plan, the program of communication, and one of this angle of the angle on nature and culture, it's aimed to be or the joint program aimed to support that specific angle. Yeah, I want to take note of all these comments, and I see you want, okay, Mr. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you, honorable gentlemen. I come from the indigenous Lakota nation in the United States, and we have this core belief that drives our culture. At the end of every prayer, we express this belief. We say, Mitakoyasin, which means we are all related. And that means every form of life in nature is related. And we as humans, as people, are part of that relationship. Because it's such a core belief, it's not what you would call our religion, but it's what drives everything that we do in our lives. This concept of a relationship. And these events like this that are driven in good part by science, which is correct, can develop all the criteria, the standards, the platforms in these kinds of gatherings. But I feel they would miss the mark if they did not attempt to transform the rest of the world into this core belief of the relationship with what indigenous people call Pachamama, Mama Yuha, different names that indigenous tribes have for this relationship, considering the earth to be a mother or a grandmother of all of us. And when you have something like that, that is such a deep belief driving you, you are more apt to find ways to take care of your Mother Earth, your grandmother Earth. And that's, I believe, the declaration from this group should put some emphasis on that kind of core belief. Thank you very much.
If I could respond to that, Kuyanani, for your kind words, and also I agree too. We all, as Indigenous people, we come from different parts of this world, and we master, or at least our elders have mastered the parts of the world that we come from and live in, and the conditions. I consider myself an Eskimo. I come from the coldest part of the world. Some people call it harsh, but it's our home. We learn to adapt to our surroundings and make do with what's there and thrive, just like yourself. Each indigenous group around this world sitting in this room are experts in their homelands, and I believe my dad used to always tell me, he said, you know what, you don't always need those letters behind your name to make comments or to have a say in this world and what's going on. And sometimes just spending time with elders like yourself and others who have stories. And there are some mentions or some comments about this declaration. When you talk about preservation, we want to ensure that we're preserving the language and the culture. Um, from the elders that we have today, and many come and many go, and I think we need to ensure that just like everything in this world, if we want to develop something that's meaningful and something that's relevant to where we live, where we come from, where we occupy, we need to be consulted and involved to develop the best possible format, whether it be a foundation for research or development for a program for culture and language. We need to ensure that we include the indigenous peoples, because I've seen many healing programs in my region where I come from absolutely fail because government does not listen to the indigenous people that are there to help whether, no matter what it's recovery from. We need to ensure that indigenous people are involved in the development of every program that's there in our regions for it to thrive. And I just wanted to share that. So thank you, Elder.
John.
Thank you, Kapak and Herb. Just a grammatical observation about where it starts. We, the participants of the Nature and Culture Summit held in Montreal, Canada, hereby, semicolon, it would grammatically sound more appropriate, I guess, when you say hereby, and in the first declarational paragraph, it says respectfully acknowledging. Would it say hereby respectfully acknowledge? And then change that accordingly to every little paragraph? Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. I'm not a native English speaker. Thank you. This editorial we will accommodate it.
Thank you. And also, in light of the elders' comments from Lakota, and also through our participation here at the summit, it shows that the summit talked about things that are still in process. They haven't been finalized, or the cross-secting knowledge basis between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, there's still a lot of work in bridging that. And we can tell from the various presentations, because there's a huge world of difference between Indigenous peoples who are connected to the Mother Earth and what they do every day, their languages and so forth, to that of the difference to that with regards to science, science-based policy, governmental processes that are non-Indigenous, and certainly heard a lot of that from folks like Ramiro, who talks about their cultural knowledge and systems and governance in Guatemala. So this is a summit. I heard a lot of interesting points of those connectors, but yet there's still a lot of work to do. And I think there's still a lot of work for the CBD and the other aspects, such as the global biodiversity a framework, to really get to a point where Indigenous peoples feel that they are being listened to, not just listened to, but their concepts are being understood. And if you can understand them, you can start to apply them in different ways. But it also has to be understood that Indigenous peoples who have their ways of life in different parts of Mother Earth wish to continue to live their way of life. not to become necessarily subjects or objects of research. They just want the freedom to live as they have and have that opportunity after many generations of colonialism, for instance, that has stopped people from doing that. And it's only more recently that you begin to see the meaning of those concepts more broadly, that perhaps science was asking all the questions and trying to find the answers. But I think for Indigenous peoples, it's also important for that mobilization of their own understandings, where it's so very much tied together on how they want to proceed, how we want to proceed with that. And certainly for the CBD process under the UN, there's a lot of pressure from other non-Indigenous systems to try to come together for us to try to determine something, but we do need that time and that space and that understanding in order to do that properly. So I would certainly wish all the best and hope that we could have more time to provide input into something like this declaration and other pieces that do come together. Miigwech.
Kuyanaini, John, I appreciate your comments, especially coming from someone who's certainly been, like yourself, who's worked around the globe, looked at wildlife, worked specialized in wildlife in different parts of the world, and have made valuable contributions. I agree. When when you bring something like this together, time certainly for some countries, as you mentioned, some countries certainly look at Indigenous peoples differently. And if we need the time, I think we also need to be cognizant of the realities, the different realities that many countries have, and between Indigenous peoples and their governments. All we could do is advocate for each other and ensure that we're moving at the pace that's comfortable for the person with the most lag, not necessarily due to capacity, but due to sometimes the restraints between themselves and the government. But when it comes to the forums like this, I think we need to, like you say, make sure that it's relevant. You look at you're talking about the CBD, and also what intrigued me most of your comment was with are the ways that Indigenous people, the freedom to live their way of life when it comes to research. Certainly in my part of the world, I can only speak for myself. We've seen a big improvement in how research is formed. We have Indigenous people, us mainly as Inuit, driving the terms and the conditions of the types of research that goes on in our region, and we make sure that it's relevant to us. As I mentioned yesterday, we depend on a lot of these mammals for our food and our clothing, and when we look at conducting research on them, we want to ensure that it's relevant to us, so that there's our food security, and also most importantly, our way of life is preserved through research and through culture, and in many aspects of it. Will bring language in as well too. So I just wanted to say thank you, John, and I'll pass it to Kapak.
Thank you, John. Yes, it was mentioned by Ramiro and several of the speakers, the reference to indigenous cover systems. I think that's something that definitely we could allocate. And yeah, just a comment as well. I think the John program gives us an opportunity to enhance the collaboration with indigenous people, and yes, we try to reflect that with the partnership in the implementation with the John program. Thank you. I would like to give you the floor, sir.
Kwe, Joshua McNeely with the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples here in Canada. I apologize, I don't have a copy of the text like the previous speaker had, but I was listening closely when you were reading, and appreciate the mention specifically of Mother Earth and recognitions of Mother Earth. We've heard from several speakers of the importance of our relationship with Mother Earth, and I'm wondering if we may be able to add into the text a specific recognition of the rights of Mother Earth, such as the Indigenous Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth, to help convey some of the sentiments that were expressed here today, some of the realities that we are but a part of a much broader, interconnected, interdependent web of life. People have talked about, the 7 generations, and we are but a point in that history, and in the ecologies that we live in, to carry our knowledge, our involvement in this web of life, and pass that to future generations, and to care for what is around us. So I think a specific mention on the rights of Mother Earth, and referencing to the declaration, may help strengthen some of that text. Thank you. Well, Aliak.
Thank you for the comment. I think we could include it in the report of the summit, that it was mentioned at the closing of the summit. And yes, of course, I take note of this. The discussions between the rights of Mother Earth, definitely it goes beyond the joint program of work, as the joint program of work aims to create or promote these links between nature and culture. Yeah, I don't see any other comments, so I would assume with all the comments and editing that we still need to work on, we are adopting that declaration. Thank you so much for joining over these 2 days. And I think we will close this section of the reading of the declaration. Again, thank you so much for all your work, all your comments. Now we will have a cultural performance, which also be part of the closing of the summit. I would like to invite our Inuit singers to join the stage.
The microphones have to go up in the middle.
You have the floor. Thank you so much for joining us.
That was a long walk to the stage. Good afternoon. My name is Nina Sigalowitz. I'm originally from Fort Smith. I'm Inuvialuit and Dene, and we're very honored to be here to share an old tradition of ours. It's called Katajak. I'll let my partner introduce herself.
Ay, Sego, Waja. What else? Kwekwe. Bonjour. Siazavunga, Inutsunga, King up me Chazavunga, Nunavumit. Nakok me Haigati, Nakok me Tusake Nalangagatik. Tak Katajalanga Sivugok. Je m'appelle Sarah. I am Sarah. And I am Inuk from Nunavut, Kingate, Cape Dorset, as it's known by its colonial name. And so, yeah.
So we're here to share an old tradition, but I think also, one of the things that I'm not a scientist and I'm not a researcher, but what I do know is that everything is connected. So for us, throat singing is a competition, it's a game, but the sounds that we do are imitations of what we hear in nature. It underlines the relationship that we have with our environment and how connected we are. And if we are healthy, then the environment is healthy. If the environment is healthy, then we are healthy. So here's some throat singing for you to celebrate that connection.
Anori.
Oh, so thank you, Nakamik. So it's a competition, and basically we're doing one sound, the same sound each, and it's in a syncopated rhythm. So one starts, the other jumps in, and the goal of the game is to not laugh. And whoever laughs first is the not winner. I don't like saying loser, so I say not winner. But yeah, so and it's not very easy to hold that gaze after a while, but it's a pastime that we used to do while the men were out doing men stuff outside the igloo.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the first song we did was Anore, which is wind. And the second song that we did, can anyone take a wild guess? Don't be shy. Okay. Well, so when you're making an igloo vigak, you need like a knife, a panna, or like a machete type to build your blocks. And so the sound of the blade hitting the ice to make your igloo, that's what that was. So roughly translated into the saw.
So water for us is very important because without water, we do not have our animals. And without animals, we cannot eat, we cannot clothe ourselves. So we have a song called The River.
Go, Balok. I was trying so hard. I didn't want to be the not winner.
The river ran out of water. You know, for us, laughter is a big way for us to heal. You know, our communities have been through so much, and but right now it's about. You know, I was listening to David Suzuki and his daughter on CBC at noon today, and it was about feeling empowered. You know, and one of the things that his daughter really reminded me is that we can do this, and it's not an Indigenous issue. It's not our issue, even though people they link us with the environment because we have maintained that relationship. And she reminded me that to less lean towards feeling hopeless and feeling more empowered, and to step into our own power as human beings and to reconnect with our environment. And remember, as we eat food, where that food comes from. I live in the city. I grew up in Montreal. I was one of the 60 scoop, and I was stolen from my mother, but I grew up in Montreal, and so the food that I eat comes from my grocery store. But I try most of the time to remember that someone picked those vegetables, that someone planted those vegetables, that someone grew those fruits. And that's how I keep that connection. Because if I don't have that connection, then I won't care what I do to my environment. And then our grand finale. So throat singing was actually something that was interdit, forbidden, when the church came and visited us in our community, and they wanted to get rid of and stop us from being who we were because they didn't understand, and they interpreted everything that we did as part of the devil. But what the elders did, the women did, they did it underground, en cachette. And that's how we kept our traditions going. Because if we were caught doing throat singing, we were put in jail or we were punished. We were isolated. But it's a good thing that those women had that fierceness and that know-how or that instinct to go underground and keep that for the generations to come. And the same thing with our environment, we need to protect her for the generations to come. So our last song is going to be Poor Little Puppy, but it's my favorite song. And we really want to thank COP 15 and for, I think it's ICC, for the invitation, for having invited us to come and share a little bit about the special songs that we do. And we've hoped that we've inspired you a little bit to keep up the good work that you're doing, and the environment really She thanks you a lot for the steps that you do. Here we go. Last one.
It's probably going to be your favorite too.
Canada's top 10.
Junos, here we come. Oh no!
All right. Yeah. Nakohmek, thank you so much. And please have a wonderful, safe rest of conference. Nakohmek.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
That was good.
We are at the closing of the Nature and Culture Summit. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the speakers, the moderators, to you to join us over these 2 days, to the artists who also share part of the cultural expression of their peoples, the interpreters who help us to communicate over these 2 days, the service conference room for all the support over all these 2 days, and of course our partners, UNESCO, IUCN, Indigenous people from IFB and as well from Canada. We spent a lot of hours making this happening. I want to thank my team at the CBD, who was this day were a bit stressing for us, but we're really happy that we made it. Before we close, just also a reminder that on the 7th floor, on room 710A, we will have a reception starting at 4:30, soon about 30 minutes. And yes, with that, I would like to invite Mr. Ben Sherman from Winta, Lakota, from the Lakota Nation, to give us some closing remarks of the summit. Ben? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Leader. That was a very enjoyable session with the Inuit singers, throat singers. Well, I gave you the core message that I brought to this convention, which is about relationships. this is about relationships that I have studied in different parts of the world. My business at WINTA, World Indigenous Tourism Alliance, is working with indigenous people around the world. And as you might realize, tourism in indigenous territories has a lot to do with the land, the landscapes, the seascapes. And so the care and custodianship of that land is very important to the indigenous people that I work with. And it's also important to a lot of non-indigenous people that I deal with around the world. We have a lot of allies that share the same, not spiritual connection, but a feeling that there is a connection to the world, the natural world. And when we talk about relationships, we're talking about relationships with yourself, with oneself, relationships with your family, relationships with your community, relationships with larger society, and very importantly, relationships with Mother Earth. And if we don't abide by those relationships, your life is going to suffer in some way. So we do the best we can to develop those relationships in a way that provides benefits to everyone and everything. And I will mention the final relationship. It has to do with a relationship with the Creator, whoever or whatever you see as the creator of this world and this universe that we live within. Now, that's not to say that you need to have a religion in order to believe that, but can be a deep spiritual belief that you have that connects you to all of nature. And so when I mentioned this expression that we have, mitakoyasin, meaning that we are all related, that is such a core belief that drives all of our activities among indigenous communities worldwide, that it's so obvious. When they talk about Mother Earth, they're very serious about Mama Yala, Pachamama, Unchimaka. Those are all expressions of this deep relationship with Mother Earth. And the tourism that we practice and that we teach throughout the world is all based upon values, values-based tourism. And that important value has to do, again, with our connection to Unchimaka. So if there's anything that I would leave you for this session here, this very good session regarding culture, it's that we would like to see in the world everyone adopt or transform into a culture that shows this deep respect and this deep love for Unchimaka, Pachamama, Mama Yala. That's my message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I see you at the reception. Thank you.